Hello everyone and welcome to the 21st edition of my Retro Movie Minute feature, a series of videos in which I go back to an older film either because I simply just want to or have an excuse to watch a movie. In this case, I actually had a legitimate excuse because today marks the release of Pokémon Detective Pikachu. And with that, there's significance in the fact that this movie is the first live-action adaptation of this material. The series has been going for over 20 years at this point in terms of its anime and the anime films. So to actually have a live-action interpretation of this material is pretty significant in my opinion, especially due to the history of Pokemon anime in America. And so I wanted to commemorate this special release by talking about the very first Pokemon film that was ever released, Pokemon the First Movie. Or as the full title says, Pokemon the First Movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back. I mean, can you really have more preteen edge in a title? Before I get into my ultimately controversial thoughts on this movie, I wanted to lay out the fact that Pokemon has been a part of my life for years. Not that I'm really a dedicated fan or anything, but I mean, back when I was really young, we're talking like 4 or 5 years old, this was when Pokemon was all the rage. Trading cards were all over the place in school, the anime was everywhere, everyone just had Pokemon fever. For me, as someone who didn't have a Game Boy growing up or didn't really have that many Pokemon cards at all, I took a lot of pleasure in following this craze by watching the anime television show. I can honestly say that I pretty much saw every single episode of both the Indigo League and the Johto League Champions series, in addition to the Advanced series that kind of covered the Ruby and Sapphire generation of games. Whether or not that was reruns weekdays on Kids WB or actually watching new episodes Saturday mornings, I religiously followed the show when I was young. And because of that, this also meant that I watched some of the movies as well. But now that I'm a grown adult and my interest in Pokemon has pretty much waned, other than simply playing as Pokemon in the Super Smash Bros. Games, you could honestly say that my opinion on Pokemon has dropped down in the past few years or so. I don't particularly care about playing any of the games anymore, and like I said, I still enjoy playing as the Pokemon in Super Smash Bros. Whenever I play with my friends, but in terms of a personal investment in this series, I don't really have that much anymore. If you love this movie, all the power to you. It is a movie that is definitely made for the fans of this series only. That in and of itself could be a positive for some, but for me, as someone who is a fan of movies first and likes Pokemon second, I have a different viewpoint than some. I wanted to be as objective and fair towards this movie as I could, for your sake and for mine. And what I was left with after a little over 70 minutes of my time was complete bafflement at just how bad this movie is. And like I said, if you like this, that's completely fine. I don't want anything that I say to change your opinion on the matter. I'm just saying that me watching this movie as someone who analyzes storytelling, thinks about the way that stories are told visually, I just couldn't get behind anything that was going on here. The animation is only marginally better than the television show. You can easily see when a film based on a television show has much better production quality than the actual television show itself. What this movie feels like is honestly just 3 episodes of the show strung together, thrown into theaters, without really any context for those who don't know what Pokemon is. So I can only imagine what parents and uninitiated film critics were like back in the day. They had to watch this movie either because their kids forced them to or they had to write a review for the paper. And they're seeing this movie that has virtually no character development. It basically just throws you into the story without any real explanation as to what the world is like or anything about the characters really, or just what you really need to know about anything to have a basic knowledge of this universe. It pretty much expects you to just have already followed the show up to that point. And so because of that, anyone who didn't like Pokemon or just didn't really care about it were already at a disadvantage, because there is nothing that this movie effectively does in order to really help someone understand what's going on. Yes, there is good setup for Mewtwo and his motivations for what he eventually does, and I like his characterization in this movie. It's probably the best aspect of it. You can see that there is real despair and confusion as to a purpose behind this character. And even though the things that he does in the second half of the movie don't really make much logical sense, you can at least see how he got to that point. From his origins and how he views humanity, and certainly how he views Pokemon as well. You understand why Mewtwo does the things that he does. And it ties into the themes of the movie as well, which is always good when you have themes of the movie that are bolstered by characters' actions. It just so happens that on the other side of the coin, when you have protagonists like Ash, Misty, Brock, Pikachu and the rest of their Pokemon. They're enjoyable characters, like if you watch the show and you followed them. But in terms of being a standalone movie, they don't carry this film at all. And like I said, that's because they have no development whatsoever in this story. They remain static and flat throughout the whole entire thing and never change. And the thing about Ash Ketchum too is that he's certainly an iconic character, you know. There are a lot of people who will dress up as him for Halloween, and even people who don't watch Pokemon or even have really any familiarity with the show whatsoever will recognize that iconic cap, the vest, the whole entire getup. But this character is seriously so dumb. In particular, I mean, I'm about to spoil something big in the third act if you haven't seen this, so be aware of that. There's a part where Mewtwo has basically shown his power by pretty much going unscathed in every single battle that he's faced against the trainer's Pokemon at this point. And Ash Ketchum, being the brave, impetuous boy that he is, wanting to protect all of his Pokemon and all of his friends at whatever cost, what does he decide to do?
You're mine!
Yeah, he freaking punches Mewtwo. Or he tries anyway, and miserably and quite hysterically fails. The stupider part of this is that even after this first attempt at punching him goes horribly wrong, he does it again! My problem with Ash Ketchum can simply be summarized by something that Zelda says to Link in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
There's a fine line between courage and recklessness. As brave as you are, that does not make you immortal.
And that pretty much sums up Ash Ketchum's character, you know. You would think that the story would give him more reasons to try to apply more logic and sense and I guess just strategy into what he does in terms of trying to beat Mewtwo. That's not to say that he's not a fun character. I think anyone can get behind him in the sense that he cares about his friends, he really wants to accomplish his goal, and he's kind of a silly and goofy character that anyone can just kind of laugh at and enjoy seeing. But from a dramatic standpoint, Ash Ketchum just doesn't really work as a protagonist. I think they needed someone who had more believable character flaws, ones that would enable him to learn from his mistakes and try to grow. And another thing I wanted to mention about this movie that I think is a horrendous flaw is the fact that its whole entire message clashes with what Pokemon really is about when it comes down to things. Look, you can take whatever I'm about to say as satire or sarcasm. I really don't care. Criticize me for it all you want. But the whole entire idea of people catching creatures and forcing them to fight one another, and then the trainers get all the glory and not the Pokemon, I mean, that's kind of a sick concept when you really get down to it. The funny thing about this movie is, you know, Mewtwo is someone who sees that idea and wants to turn it on its head and basically free Pokemon from humans' control, which you can kind of get why he's saying. You know, humans use Pokemon for their own personal gain in the sense that they use them to battle and they incorporate them into every aspect of their lives, and the humans take all the credit, essentially. While Ash, Misty, and Brock try to make their own arguments against him, really it's Mewtwo's argument that makes more sense, and the movie tries to downplay his and try to ultimately make this message about anti-violence, anti-prejudice, and anti-racism. It falls apart because it tries so hard to justify trainer battles versus just Pokemon having, you know, wild, vicious fights against each other. And as someone who really tries to think about how movies make logical sense and moral sense too, Pokemon the first movie is just hilarious in the fact that it can't really decide whether or not Pokemon should be about, you know, pro-animal rights or if it should be about exploiting animals for human entertainment. Should I really be analyzing this movie that far? I mean, it's a 7-minute long commercial for the anime show, and I don't know, guys. I mean, there's not really much here to begin with. I'm just spitballing and letting you know that these are the thoughts that I had rewatching this movie again. And it kind of confirmed to me kind of the whole ridiculousness of the whole Pokemon series to begin with. So I don't know. Am I a cynical curmudgeon? I very well could be. That's just my opinion. You can take it as you will. Go and love Pokemon as much as you will. Go buy the Sword and Shield version of the game when it comes out on the Nintendo Switch this year. Have your fun with Detective Pikachu. I mean, I'm going to watch it. Keep on loving this series as much as you have been. You know, I don't want anything that I have said to take you away from that. I'm just letting you know that I don't know. I used to really like this movie, but watching it as an adult, it's very apparent to me that it kind of proliferates the flaws that have always been with Pokemon for ages. And as a movie itself, it just doesn't work because the storytelling falls flat on its face, the characters have no progression, and the animation is pretty mediocre, honestly. So with that, I'm going to be giving Pokemon the first movie a D. And I really don't need to give an age recommendation for this either. This was clearly made for young kids. And even the violence, really, it's just like, it's there, but if any kid was already watching the show to begin with, none of the action here is really going to be deeper or more intense than that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say it's okay for pretty much all ages. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Yes, my next video will be on Detective Pikachu, so look forward to that coming in the next few days. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to my channel. You can also check out my Facebook page or Letterboxd page or Instagram pages in the links in the description below. And thank you for watching, guys. Have a good one.